What's the biggest dong move you've ever done to a kid and felt no remorse afterwards? Next to my high school there was an elementary school. Some of the kids here were really fricked up, around 8-10 years old, standing outside the school smoking and being rude little fricks to everyone that walked past them. We were shocked with their vocabulary of obscenities. Anyway, one day I was walking by alone eating some buns. This one shit kid comes up to me with a smug as frick look on his face and yells, "Give me a freaking bun, you dong." The look on my face was something of shock of disbelief as I replied no frick off before I turned my back on the kid and started walking away. Big freaking mistake. I suddenly feel a slight push and weight added to my back. The kid was hanging on my back, pulling my hair and screaming, "Give me a freaking bun." I felt like I had been attacked by an angry leper gnome. In my panic, the only thought I had in my head was frick, get this crap off me, and in some weird move worthy of WWE I spun around quickly while strengthening my back and loosened my backpack, which caused this little crap to fly off me. He spun around in the air and landed face first on the concrete. He immediately started crying like the crap kid he was. I proceeded to walk over to him. His bloody face stared up at me in fear and pain as I picked up my backpack, constantly staring hard into his teary fear-filled eyes. I turned my back on him again, picked up a new bun and enjoyed the fading sound of the tears of a child together with my sweet bun. I went to India to visit family last year. My mom's side is awesome, but my dad's side not so much. My dad had me go with him to visit them for a couple days. I met my cousin's children for the first time. His son was 6 years old. My first impression was that he was adorable, but within 2 hours it quickly became apparent that he was a devil incarnate. He would hit and pinch and spit on me, with no consequence from his parents. I could do nothing about this, as I did not want to cause issues and was not close to this side of the family. While we were shopping and he came up to me and hugged my leg, I thought, maybe he has a good side in him after all. Then he pinched my ballsack, out of nowhere. Hard, like super freaking hard. I slapped that bee across the face so hard people turned from the sheer sound of it. Then I backhanded him with equal force. He cried and went running to his dad. His dad asked me what happened. I told him his son just pinched me in the balls. Third slap from his old man. Home run. I love it when a family comes together. I used to lifeguard while in high school at a community pool with a big twisty water slide. There was always a guard at the slide for safety and whatnot, and one of the things we had to watch out for were those kids' bathing suits with the built-in life jacket. Due to the life jacket, inevitably the kids would end up hitting their heads pretty hard against the walls of the slide around the twists every time. So one day, a boy wearing a life jacket suit wants to go down the slide while I'm on duty, and I told him that he could not due to the risk of injury. 5 minutes later the boy's mom comes up to me and starts yelling about not letting her kid on the slide, and so I calmly explain our policy due to past incidents blah blah, but she's having none of it. The whole time the kid was standing behind his mom with this smug look like he knew he was going to get what he wants. So after a few minutes of this I gave up and just said fine, go down the slide. Prove me wrong. Sure enough, as he's about halfway down I hear 2 loud bangs as he gets thrown about in the slide. As soon as he exits the slide he starts crying. I, of course, would have administered first aid, give him an ice pack, because it's my job, but the mom just grabbed him still crying and left without making eye contact with anyone. I know it was probably more of the mom's fault than the kid's, but wiping that look off his face was quite gratifying. We don't get too many kids in my coffee shop, but when we do 90% of the time they are little monsters whose parents let them run wild. I work at a busy store, so we have rope line dividers snaking through the front of the store. A girl who was maybe 6 or 7 decided it would be a good idea to start vaulting over the dividers. That in itself wouldn't bother me too much, but she kept this up for nearly an hour, getting in the way of actual paying customers the whole time. I was running the shift, so I nicely asked her if she wouldn't mind knocking it off, as she was liable to get hurt. In the snottiest way imaginable she said, "You're not the boss of me," and kept right on jumping. One of my employees suggested I go talk to the parents, but I had a better idea. "Just wait and watch," I told her. I noticed that with each jump she was clearing the rope by fewer and fewer inches, and it was only a matter of time before the inevitable happened. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, the little darling made her last jump. got her foot tangled in the rope, and landed smack down on the tiles, face first. It was one of the most satisfying sounds I'd ever heard. She wasn't seriously injured or anything, but boy did she start wailing. Her absentee parents ran over and started yelling at me as if it was my fault, at which point I told them my job was to make coffee, not raise their children for them. They stormed out, with their bratty blubbering offspring in tow. You might think I'm slightly sadistic for gleaning enjoyment out of a child getting hurt, and you might be right, but the way I see it, she learned a lesson that day, one that her parents most certainly were never going to teach her. I went to a wedding a few years ago, and one of the bride's younger, 12, 13 years old, female cousins was beyond obnoxious. Her mother was even worse, which is why I imagine the little girl was this way. Over the course of the afternoon, I heard her say such gems as I would never shop at Walmart. All my clothes are name brand. This was said to a 7-year-old girl in a very cute dress she proudly proclaimed her mother bought her at Walmart on sale. Later, while eating cake, the little bee stole some of the 7-year-old's dessert, stating that it's for your own good. You're too chubby. The 12-year-old was probably already 130 pounds, with her dress taut over her stomach and caught under her 3 chins. The one that really got to me though, was when she started boasting that she was going to catch the bouquet. Every adult in the place was severely annoyed by her at this point, except for her mother, who seemed to be proud, and I made it my mission to catch that goddamn bouquet. When it came time for the tossing, I centered myself and gave a wink to my friend, the bride. She threw it right at me, and the little 12-year-old lunged for it. I elbowed that bee right in the freaking face, and caught the flowers. Not even a little remorse. This is a win for the books. When I was 16, there were these 3 tough kids in middle school who constantly bullied my 9-year-old little brother. They would do crap like stealing his bike from our garage and hiding it somewhere, and their parents wouldn't do anything to stop them. So one time, when I knew they were going to be coming around soon, I purposely left the garage door wide open with his bike sitting there in the middle, put my brother on my back and carried him up to the garage roof. I gave him my airsoft gun, 430 FPS with .22 BBs, which he was a god with, superb accuracy, and sat there waiting for the shitstorm. Sure enough, the 3 kids show up, riding skateboards, and the moment they exit the garage with my brother's bike, he just unloads full auto on their backs. Holy crap, yes, that crap hurts with sweatshirts on. Can't imagine just a t-shirt. Kudos to your brother for being kick-ass. When I was in high school, grade 10, we had first period gym with this butthole of a senior who was still taking grade 10 classes because he was a total meathead and just dumb as a stump. So naturally, because this fuckstick was bigger than most of the kids in the class, he harassed and bullied them around. Me being a bigger kid and always into sports was left alone. But my best friend was a tad on the small side and he got it the worst out of everyone. So one day after getting ready for class, this kid rips my buddy's shirt right off his back and starts running around with it. And because my friend doesn't have another one, he has to sit out the entire class. So halfway through the class, I go into the locker room to take a crap and I notice little fucktard's locker is unlocked. So I go into this locker and his book bag is inside. I open it up and take a massive dump with no hesitation. Best part is he doesn't notice the crap until he's on his next class. When he opens the bag, it fills the room and everyone has to leave. The kid got suspended that day for a week because the teacher and principal didn't believe that he didn't do it himself as a joke. He was also placed in the remedial classes when he got back from suspension, and my buddy never got bullied again. Don't dish it out unless you're willing to get crap on. I just got my wisdom teeth out, and I laughed so hard at the end I started bleeding. Well played. I was working at a surf skate shop when I was 18 in the late 90s. A mom comes in, complains that her kid's skate shoes are showing wear on the toe because the kid is actually using them. She yelled at her kid in front of us, and then demanded a full refund. I told her that the shoes are not indestructible, but do last longer than most shoes. She freaks and demands to see a manager. I turn around to walk to the back, and then turn around to face her and say, "Yes, I am a manager. Can I help you?" The lady freaked the frick out, yelled at everyone, and stormed out. The best part was that I wasn't a manager, and my manager was watching the entire thing go down. He loved it. Lost it at the end. That's awesome. I hope I ever have a boss as awesome as that. While shopping with the wife, there was this little bratty kid. 5 or 6 I guess. He was running around like he was on a coke high, screaming his lungs out, pushing people's carts and being an unbelievable nuisance. His mother was apparently not interested in his shenanigans, since she did nothing about it and didn't even look much for him. Then suddenly he lost sight of her. He stands there in the middle of the shop, looking around and starts screaming in an angry voice from the top of his lungs, "Mom, moo-oom, moo-oom." I can see her neither, so I bend down to him and tell him, in the sweetest sing-song voice I can muster, "Your mom is never coming back." The shock look on his face was totally worth destroying a child's soul. While on deployment overseas, we'd do patrols with our vehicles out through town, just checking things out and showing a presence in the area to the locals. We usually had some hard candies or pieces of bubble gum we'd throw out to the kids who'd see our vehicles and come running. There was this one kid who would constantly try and run up to the vehicles and grab our gear off of it or whatever he could get his little hands on before we'd see him and start to yell, and he'd bolt away. The kid became such a problem that one day we took a Gatorade bottle and filled it brimming to the top with pee and placed it easily grabbed on the outside of the vehicle and set out. Sure enough, Swiper came skulking up as he usually did, looking already guilty. He knew what he was about to do, and so did we. As expected, when we all turned away to give him his moment, he ran up to the vehicle, swiped the bottle to the side and took off running as we fainted some yells and points at him to paint the picture that we were genuinely upset. The little thief stood on the side of the road grinning like he just robbed Fort Knox of all its gold, unscrewed the cap, took a huge swig and swallowed, and then promptly threw up and started crying while continuing to bar. Never had a problem from him again, nor any other kid for that matter. My friends and I, around age 18, were coming home from the smoke shop after having just picked up shisha for the hookah. Well, as we turn onto his street, and it's dark mind you, these 3 little kids, 8 12-year-old boys, start swerving their bikes directly in front of the car. At first my friend, driver, slows down thinking they didn't see us turn towards them. So we slowly keep serpentine around in front of us, intentionally diving their bikes right in front of the car, literally a mere few feet from the front bumper of the Explorer. We try our best to be mature about it, so we slowly follow them until we get to his house. We hop out of the car in front of where my friend thinks the kids live, walk up and knock. Their mother answers, 2 of them. Apparently the third was a friend, but they all looked alike to us. She proceeds to tell us to stop staring at children and call us perverts and pedophiles. So, trying to handle the situation, we go to my friend's house and ask his mother to go speak to her. She comes back livid, red-faced, and flabbergasted. Apparently the women told her we were the epitome of what slaves should be, all of us white oddly, and that we all needed therapy, medical help for our addiction to children. Yup, we got called pedophiles. 3 18-year-old guys. Next day we are coming back from the grocery store, and lo and behold, the 3 little snots ride out in front of us. The mom sitting on the front porch. We slow down, yell at her, and she flips us off. The fricking bee. We decided crap got real if they did this again, and planned ahead. The next trip we brought pool noodles that were all covered in duct tape, and all of us wore hoodies and carried flashlights. Around 9 PM we made our move, turning the corner at 10-15 miles per hour. Kids skid in front of us and start circling and even begin taunting. So we slowly try to move forward until one of the snots spits on the right side window. The windows were rolled down, and the 2 kids near the windows savagely beaten with pool noodles. Their bikes fell under them as they ran, and we proceeded to snap the frame of both bikes under the car. Later that night the mother came with the police to my friend's house, telling his mother that we assaulted the kids. We all calmly explained what happened, what the mother had said, and later, neighbors would state that the kids did it to others as well. The mother got fined for some crap like public danger to others, as her kids were causing motorists to nearly hit them. Freaking B. TL. DR. Called pedo by spawner of Satan children. Pool noodle the frick out of them. B gets fined by the police. Best solution. Had this happen in college by a bunch of frat-tastic brotards attempting to impress some girls, driving through the parking lot and they just form a line walking down the lane. I roll up behind them, they turn and look at me and continue walking. I put the car into neutral and revved like heck. They scattered. I was driving down a very narrow street, and there were these two teenage kids walking in the road. They saw that I was there, but I guess they thought it was funny to stay in my way. After it was done being cute, one of them moves off of the road, but the other continues walking towards my car with the worst crap-eating grin spread across his face that I had ever seen. I decided it would be good fun to rev the engine to give the kid a scare, since beeping hadn't done a thing. Well, I sure did accomplish my goal of scaring the little crap. Completely on accident, my foot slid off the brake and I sped towards the kid, who was in so much shock that he didn't even have time to get out of the way. Luckily, for both of us, I didn't smash his butt into the pavement, but I did manage to brush his jacket as I drove past. Watching his expression turn from maddeningly smug to pure horror was one of the most satisfying things I have ever experienced. I'm positive that he was unharmed physically, but he may have crap himself in front of that girl he had been trying to impress. I work at a supermarket and I once told a kid that was running around screaming that he had to go to grocery jail. I made him sit in a shopping cart lined with Limburger cheese next to me until his parents showed up. Fast forward 30 years. He always keeps a pack of Limburger cheese in his refrigerator. He gets antsy when he runs out. Every woman he's ever involved with is obliged to keep a pack of Limburger cheese in her house. If she doesn't, he can't control himself around her, and he has no idea why. When I was in 8th grade I formed a posse to take down a 3rd grader. Kid had it coming in the worst of ways, though. This kid was a menace. I heard stories about him mainly because my younger brother was in his class, would constantly harass students, yell at teachers, and be a total dong to everyone. Eventually it got to the point where in 3rd grade he picked up a ceramic cat statue and chucked it at the teacher. This teacher was the same woman that taught me and all of my friends. She was a 70-year-old woman with an incredibly frail body that spouted jokes like a stand-up comedian and drove a bright yellow Hummer. She was the bomb, and this little butthole not only threw her favorite statue but hit her right in the wrist with it, breaking the wrist. Kid got in a light amount of trouble and had to go to counseling, but nothing serious ever came from it because the teacher didn't want to cause a fuss. A few months later there was a huge snowstorm and I ended up at a local park with pretty much my entire 8th grade class. Suddenly, we see the same kid assaulting 1st graders with snowballs. We decide enough is enough and decide to take matters into our own hands. Inner tubes filled with ammo, ice balls made specifically for the first wave and a ton of softer rounds for the bulk. Shovels packed with mountains of snow. We descended on the little crap like the Rohirrim into Helm's Deep. It was a slaughter. His older brother was there as well, but he just stood on the sidelines and watched as we buried this kid and told him to never frick with that teacher ever again. He switched schools 3 weeks later. TLDR. A blizzard of pain was brought down upon a cat-slinging punk. Once back when I was a lifeguard I was at McDonald's and these kids were running around screaming and being a nuisance in the main seating area, as opposed to the play place. I had just gotten off from working a double in the hot sun with nearly no downtime and really just wanted to vegetate. The little hellions whizzed past me and out of habit I lifted my trusty Fox 40 whistle to my mouth and blasted it as hard as I could. Now, the company claims that a Fox 40 can be heard over 2 miles away. I can't vouch for the truth of that statement, but I can tell you that on a staff outing we confirmed that these whistles can be heard across the Rangers ballpark in Arlington. God bless. The whistle's piercing note tears through that unsuspecting McDonald's like a gunshot riding on a freight train. Following hot on its heels in the deafened silence that followed was a bellow trained through years to reach the far end of a pool across throngs of screaming children. Walk please. One of the children began to whimper. I was so out of it that I didn't even realize I'd acted until the girl sitting across the table from me began giggling nearly 3 minutes later. I'd do it again. I have one of those and can vouch for how bloody loud and piercing they are. Brilliant fun to play with around young children. Now walk, please. Walking up a ramp to the platform of a train station from the concourse, I so happened to witness a teen and his buddy, still can classify as a kids, walking up and come face to face with an elderly man. Rather than just move out of the way and continue, the kid decides to go up in the man's face saying, "Move out of the way, you old F." Upon seeing and hearing this, I, like most of you perhaps, wanted to smack this kid upside his head. However, I decided I'd take a more sweeter form of justice. Fortunately, he and his chum boarded the same train as me. I sat not too far away from him, cause I saw that he was carrying a guitar. He played a few tunes, which weren't even that good, making it even easier to serve this brat justice. I appealed to his better nature, saying how good he was the guitar and whatnot. Naturally, he asked if I could play, and yes, I can. He again asked if I could play a few songs, to which I obliged. I began playing a few songs, mostly finger styles if any of you are wondering, but began to act as if a few notes were off tune. I tell him that a few of his strings are off tune, and offered to tune up his guitar. I turned the pegs here and there, and I actually did tune the guitar, but not to a standard tuning. I tuned it to probably 5 to 6 notes higher, low E, resulting in all 6 strings to be extremely tight. I asked him to play the most strum intensive song he knew, and perhaps a minute into the song, all the strings snapped. Yes. In first grade, I had to go to the bathroom really bad, but the teacher was busy and told us not to bother her. Well, I couldn't hold it in anymore and pee everywhere. My pants were soaked and there was a giant puddle in the chair. I nonchalantly moved to another area of the room, trying my best to hide my wet shorts. Well, this bully named Sheldon went and sat over in my pee puddle. He freaked out and the teacher thought it was him and sent him to the principal and ultimately home. Frick you, Sheldon, you were an butthole. I had to go with my parents to their friend's house. They had a son who was about, I guess 4 or 5 years old. He was usually well behaved, but that one time we were there, he decided it was a good idea to walk around with his pants and underwear off, grab anything he can and rub it on his dong. His and my parents said that it was just a phase and that it was totally harmless. Then he had to go grab my chopsticks and my napkin and rub them all over and under his happy place. At that point, I got pretty annoyed him and decided enough was enough. So I got a bottle of hot sauce that was nearby and poured some on my napkin and waited. As I predicted, he soon came toddling over, grabbed my napkin, and began rubbing it on his penis. And then the crying began. Achievement unlocked, evil genius. 2 incidents come to mind. The first was in a restaurant. The kid was running around the restaurant at high speed, making a loop. Around and around he went, yelling and knocking items off of people's tables. He zipped by my table one too many times and I tripped him. He did a long sliding face plant, jumped back up and started crying and yelling at me. His parents grabbed him up and hauled him out of there and telling him to leave people alone. The second was at a zoo. I have noticed when walking into a store or other public space that people walk about the same speed and though they aren't together, will be around each other for the duration. That was happening at the zoo. We went in about the same time and were spending the day together. Even if I didn't want to, their kid was wild with energy. He would throw things, like popcorn at everything, me included, and even though I asked his parents several times to get it under control, nothing much really changed. I took a left when they went right and thought that was the end of it, but a bit later we were next to each other again. I was hoping the kid had settled down, but he was just as loud and obnoxious as ever. We were in front of the camels and I said to him, "Hey kid, come here and look at this." For those that don't know, camels spit, and this kid started throwing popcorn at the camel and yelling at it. Suddenly the camel had enough and let out a huge lurgy. It covered the side of the kid's face and was running down onto his shirt and he started crying and yelling. He ran over to his parents and told them I made the camel spit on him. His dad started yelling at him and said, "Are you bothering that man again?" He then got a swat on the seat of the pants and they left the zoo. So when we were younger, my sister had one of her friends and the friend's big sister over to our house. This was not the first time they had been over, and our sister's friend is super cruel to animals. Last time she was over, she shoved our cat's face down a glass of chocolate milk, tugged its tail and just being a bee. So later me and my brother is outside in front of our balcony, which is on the first floor, about 5 meters above ground level. Our sister and the two friends are standing on the balcony. My brother is just bouncing this tennis ball and the B friend tells us to throw it up to them and they'll catch. So my brother aims it for the friend's face and throws it hard. The ball flies and hits her right in the freaking face. She stands there for about 2 seconds trying to understand what just happened. And then you see how her face shrivels up and she just starts crying her eyes out. Me and my brother just got this frick yeah feeling. I have one. A couple years back we were having a giant neighborhood water balloon fight on Easter. Things were going well enough when this little girl, who was maybe 9, went running to the bins we had set out to grab another balloon. She passed by a boy of about 12 years and the little crap stuck his foot out and tripped her. She face planted on pavement and started crying. I took my balloon and just threw a perfect arc and nailed him right in the face. He went home crying. I went home smiling. When riding the bus home from high school one day, a little elementary school boy decided throwing chunks of muffin at me from across the bus was a great idea. I began collecting the small pieces one by one, and as I walked off the bus, I turned to him, looked him straight in the eyes and shoved a handful of muffin right into his face, eyes, nose, mouth, all in one motion. It was pretty impressive. Felt so good, and no remorse seeing him shed tears of muffin. Shed tears of muffin. Brilliant. My mum once admitted to me about something that happened when she taught primary school in the late 70s and she had this one trouble kid. You know the type, never been told no, bully of the playground, violent. His parents wouldn't take responsibility for his behavior and bailed him out whenever he got into trouble. Putting him in the corner and other non-physical punishments had little to no effect on him. Then one day mum is doing her normal playground rounds and she finds the boy on top of a little girl, smacking her head into the pavement. When she tells this part she is literally shaking with remembered rage and you can just tell she lost her crap when she saw that. So she drags them apart and takes the crying girl to the school nurse who pronounces her not dangerously hurt, but only because she was lucky. By this time mum is ridiculously angry. The boy could have killed the little girl. Would have probably if mum hadn't interceded. She knows nothing will change if she calls the parents and the headmaster is useless. So she takes the boy into the classroom, shuts the door and takes out one of those long wooden 1 meter ruling sticks. Now I know what you're thinking right now. Beating children is bad, not to mention she could lose her job. Mum isn't thinking about that. She isn't a violent person. Never raised a hand against any of her 3 kids, but this boy has gone too far. She smacks him right across the backs of his thighs with the ruler. Not too hard, just enough to show she means business. 2 things happen. 1. A split in the wood of the ruler pops open with the pressure of the blow and then pinches closed again on his skin. 2. The kid screams blue murder. She swears you could hear it through the entire school. Luckily nothing was said of the incident and from then on the kid behaved himself, especially when mum had her ruler out. TLDR. Mum went to smack the school bully for beating up a little girl. He finally mends his ways. I work at a restaurant as a prep dishwasher. The boss's son is a bit porky and spoiled. He comes in and says crap like you're doing X wrong. You need to do Y. This kid's like 12. He has that annoying sucker on Xbox Live vibe going. So, one day he tells me I'm not gonna tell you how to do your job, but you need to clean the dishes. I'm not gonna tell you that you're huge spoiled bee, but you need to lay off that ice cream. I know it's risky to tell this to a 13-year-old whose mother signs my checks, but a week of hearing this made me snap. When I was working in the outdoors, me and a couple of friends drove over to the local village shop to get some beers for the evening. When we arrive I'm driving so I stay in the car whilst everyone else goes inside to get stuff. Just after the guys go inside, I see a group of chaps that can't be more than 11-12 years old go and sit on the wall next to the shop. They ask a few people that walk past if they would buy them and they get told no repeatedly. My mates come back anyway and I point this out to them and Matt, my best bud, goes oh, leave the engine running mate, gets out of the car and walks over to them. He gets the tenner they've been waving around and asks what F they want. The kids look happy as frick as he heads into the shop. 2 minutes later he runs out of the shop with another crate of beer, jumps into the car and yells at me to floor it. As we streak past the chavs he shouts don't give your money to strangers and gives them the finger. Unlucky chavs. Beers tasted much better after that. D. I worked at a Toys R Us twice doing seasonal work around the big holidays, Christmas and such. Anyway, you have to find ways to amuse yourself and keep from going insane with all the bratty kids and exasperated parents. So I did one pretty crappy thing that I have no remorse for. I was scheduled to work the first shift on Black Friday, the day after American Thanksgiving, where crap is all on sale for some freaking reason, and they made me wear the Jeffrey the Giraffe costume. First rule is, don't talk, dance, pose for photos and keep your mouth shut. Don't ruin it for the kids. Particularly crappy kid kept punching me in the balls while I was posing with him for the photo. I was in the suit but it still hurt. Wouldn't cut it out. So after the photo was taken, I knelt down, got my giraffe head at his eye level, and whispered, "Your parents told me not to say anything, but you were adopted." That little sucker started wailing so loud, crying his eyes out, made everyone waiting in the rain outside at 6 in the morning on a cold butt day even more miserable. Best part was, the parents complained, but since I was in costume and they had just hired a crap ton of new people, they had no idea who had done it. TLDR. Got hit in the balls one too many times. Told a little kid he was adopted while dressed as a cartoon giraffe. There was a kid on the train going from north to south Greece which was being ridiculously annoying, screaming, throwing stuff, and generally being a brat. His mother was asleep and obviously didn't care. At one of the stops, vendors were on the platform selling a classic snack, souvlaki sticks, grilled cubes of meat on a stick, and I buy two. As I am eating, the kid is running up and down the track. I call him over and I tell him, "You know what this meat is from?" He looks at me, and I answer, "The last little girl who was being noisy and took a barbaric bite from my souvlaki." The kid ran to his mom and hid behind her the rest of the ride. The other passengers who were on the train must have overheard, because all I got was smiles of approval. It was something I did unintentionally and had no regret whatsoever. I used to live with two younger cousins. They were 7 and 4 at the time. They always came into my room and mess it up, like peeing on my shirt and tearing my books. I can't lock my room because my aunt has her open door policy in her home. Her house, her rules, right? So I have to put my school bags and project on the top of the shelf, which is about 7 feet high. One day, I was fixing my bookshelf and forgot to put a screw support. I went out and came home to a broken bookshelf. Later my aunt came home with her kids. Them kids climbed the bookshelf and fell. Both of them kids got stitches. I ain't even mad until my aunt kicked me out of the house for causing this. TLDR. Loose screw on the shelf. Kids climb it. Fell and got stitches. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.